Oh, well, I started off being an artist back in the 80s. I finished architecture school and I worked in architecture. And I felt like there were a lot of constraints around architecture, that it was more like an applied art as opposed to a fine art. And I thought that I wanted to have something that was more expressive and more personal. So I got involved in painting, and I'd always liked painting. I'd been painting since I was a teenager. And, you know, knowing that that was going to be complicated, money-wise and all that kind of thing, was just like, well, I might as well go for it, you know. So I did, but I kept working, you know, like part-time and stuff. And it wasn't until the late 90s that I started doing some things in clubs with some people here on the beach, in the old days of South Beach, the club days and so forth. And, you know, that felt kind of good and fun. And then I did a piece for the first Basel Fair that involved impersonating a realtor, a real estate agent, for an installation that I'd done. And, you know, it was very comfortable doing that, actually. It was really comfortable. And I think people enjoyed it. It was a way of, like, walking people through the installation and adding a dimension to it. And that was very well received. And then people started, you know, I didn't try to do that because I didn't want to be sort of pigeonholed. But people then started calling me a performance artist. The next year I did something else that involved art collectors. And I had like a doll, a blow-up doll as my wife. And I had done all this artwork that was meant to be by fictitious artists. And in some cases kind of satirizing some of the art, you know, that was around in the art world at the time. It was 2002, I guess. I was called Mr. and Mrs. Katzenjammer, Herb and Kitty Katzenjammer, the collectors. And so I just, you know, I kept doing stuff, but people didn't want to, they didn't care about the paintings. They wanted to see performance. I guess it was just fun for people. People seemed to think that I was good at that, and I kind of enjoyed it, but at the same time, you know, I wanted to do some other things too. So, you know, I wound up using some photography and some video in relation to the performances. I guess at first as documentation, and then just using myself in frames to create photographs and videos, you know, including portraits, self-portraits as different characters and so forth. And so that's where I'm now. You know, I do a lot of different things. I create props. A lot of the performance work has evolved into being about, you know, the fundamental core of performance is that there's a presence, there's a human presence. And we all know what that is, although we forget because we're surrounded by people all the time. It's really an electromagnetic presence that we share with each other. And so part of my strategy has been to, for example, remove some of the elements of presence to sort of try to coax people to experience presence on a new level. So for example, the first one that was like that was probably the bride, where I was way up high in a big skirt up near the 16-foot ceiling in a dress that had a ladder inside of it that you had to climb up the ladder and poke your head out of the top of this giant dome-shaped skirt and then put on the wedding dress and fluff out the skirt of the more life-size dress over the constructed dress. And then people couldn't talk to me. They had to go outside where a camera was being picked up on a screen, and then I had an earpiece and a remote mic, and so I could hear them asking me questions from outside of the space, and then I would answer them, and they would hear the answers on the TV set that was set up out there on the side. So that was a way of, you know, you could walk into the space, and I'm there, but you can't talk to me. You have to go outside to talk to me. So now the whole thing of presence, well, he's in the next room, but he's way up high, and then you would just see, like, my face. So that was meant to sort of, I guess you could say, best point out how, you know, we're used to like talking to people face to face or far away, but now you're talking to someone far away, even though they're in the next room. You could go back into the room and hear me answering questions to people outside. Then I did a piece called Art Dummy. And you couldn't talk to him at all. You had to contact him on Facebook, as a matter of fact. And he was a ventriloquist dummy. So that was all about speech and non-speech communication and, you know, meaning to get into the whole idea of texting and stuff like that. And now the suit, I'll be in this suit, and you won't be able to really discern my face because I'm going to be wearing some big glasses and have some shag rug, which I hope somebody's looking for, on my head as hair. And then, but you can. So this is meant to sort of introduce the sensation of touch. So even though you can't really perceive me, and I'm in this fortress-like men's suit, you can shake my hand. And as people who are interested in that sort of thing know, the palm of the hand is one of the principal chakras of the body, an energy point. So it's not an accident, according to the chakra believers, that the palm of the hand, we touch palms when we shake hands, because we're really exchanging energy with each other, and manipulating that energy into the other person's hand.
But
So
why a wooden suit?
Well, I like wood. It's fun to work with. I've used wood for a lot of the other things. It's certainly a lot easier to work with than steel or something. And I think the wood's really appropriate in this case. It's not even going to be painted. It'll have a wood finish, maybe some polyurethane on it. We say about someone who's a little stiff that they're a little wooden. And as I think I mentioned to you, I'm very interested in the whole sort of cultural construct of the suit as this kind of male suit of armor, really. And it's a rigid garment full of padding. And it's meant to define particularly the man's upper body, the jacket, in a kind of, really artificial way. It gives all men, whether they actually possess broad shoulders or not, it gives them all broad shoulders. It gives them all an expanded-looking chest by having padding there in the chest area. And then from there, of course, it can usually taper in, unless a person is a real pot belly, and make them appear to have this very trim waist in comparison to the artificial stuffed shoulder pads. So the idea is this idea of, masculinity is this sort of cultural idea of stuffing your feelings and being this kind of wooden, rigid, strong figure that really is a rigid concept. Men are just as human as women. They have all the ranges of feelings of women. It's just that they're taught not to express a whole bunch of them because it's not considered masculine. So I find that really interesting. We've had a lot of women's movement concerns and stuff, and normally you'd think that there would be a correlating change in the perception of masculinity, and I think that that's been a little slow to follow, which has led me to suspect that there's kind of an invested interest in keeping at least one gender sort of this inscrutable and monolithic gender stereotype that never falls apart, even though we're surrounded by men falling apart all the time, either grabbing guns and shooting people or committing suicide or things like that for whatever reason. So lifetime of stuffing your feelings isn't necessarily a healthy thing.
Perfect.